I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching Spotlight. Today, the Spotlight is on education, hopefully in the post-pandemic years. And we're headed into the school year 22-23, and with us to talk about the experiences of what they learned during the pandemic and how it impacted education and then going forward is Principal Mike Drury from Chicago Christian High School in Palos Heights here on the College Drive. Principal Drury, thank you for being here this morning.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's probably, maybe it doesn't need to be said, but I'll do the quick run through that. I think the last couple of years, almost 2.5 years, were incredibly difficult and challenging for education. Not just, teachers and administrators and students, but everybody, families, community, support staff, up and down the line. I mean, this was a very difficult experience for a lot of people, and we're hoping that this next fall the world's going to look a little different, a little better, But what I'd like to do is kind of explore how you adapted during those years, what you learned from it, and then ultimately, how it'll impact education going forward. So maybe first, if you could talk a little bit about what was, like in March 13th, the day of infamy right now, what your role as principal at Chicago Christian was, and then what types of adaptations did you put in place to kind of get through as it came in piecemeal, actually, because you probably didn't know you were going to be out the rest of that school year.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah, what did that look like for you?
Teacher training never prepared me for this at all, and and all my teachers too didn't see this coming. And so when that week following that kind of shut down across the whole country, we had to have a lot of shifting in our minds. And so our teachers had to adapt to technology, get used to some things. So we turned around pretty quickly, had us a couple staff meetings where we came together, say, what do we need to do? So that week after things shut down, we came together, worked through some Zoom technology, upgraded what we had in our staff laptops, and then we just started going. We didn't know what we were doing too much, but we adapted well. And the big focus, though, was how we finished the school well, with being online.
You already had a one-to-one situation, right? All your kids, all your students had laptops already?
Correct.
Okay.
So we could pivot pretty quickly with our laptops that way, but our teachers were just not used to teaching online.
Right.
And so that's where we were coming together, brainstorming as a staff, what's the best practices here? And so then what teachers would do is like, hey, I found this, let's try this resource. And we'd spread that around to the staff and try out different technology pieces to make that work. And that worked rather well for us, so we pivoted a lot during that time.
I would think, and you mentioned that you had a couple days of staff institute or in-service like days that Monday, Tuesday after March 13th, so that probably helped your staff kind of develop a mindset on what this experience is going to look like. But the kids didn't know what was coming yet.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So we kind of battle planned behind the scenes. Yeah. Then we did a soft rollout at the end of the week to our kids. Like, hey, this is what we're going to try to do. And so we're like, this is expectations. We developed our own little e-learning schedule where we can give a structure and routine to the kids, and we practice that out at the end of the week, and then we started rolling with that the following week, and we tweaked as needed. We kind of made a schedule, found out, hey, that was a little too long for certain classes or breaks wise, so during those final weeks there and into April, we kind of adjusted our schedule to make that work, and kind of based on the feedback from parents and kids.
That's interesting because now that I think about it, and I was still teaching at that point, I remember how long the class periods were and how different that is when you're locked into a screen for, 35, 40, 50. Original class periods might be in that 50-plus minute range.
Correct.
I don't know if you can teach like that at a screen with the kids. And then the break time, which in schools was always a transition period to walk to another class, actually became kind of important as a break time to step away from your computer or go get a drink or go to the bathroom.
Right? For sure, because we found out that like 25 minutes was like the ideal time for like direct, like on Zoom with the students to do that. Because what teachers would tend to do was like, all right, let's go some direct instruction, here we want to do, then work on these other assignments, work on these things. And that was through the morning, and then in the afternoon we had like office hours. So it's like, hey, I need some extra help on what was assigned in class. Teachers would be available from like 1 to 3 to work with kids to do that. We really found out like the shorter amount of time you had online is actually more effective to make that work then.
Right, and when you think about it from a teacher standpoint, there's very few periods where you're 50 minutes lecturing or whatever the thing is. So part of that is the students working on something. That's interesting, and that's adapting on the fly. And I know the answer to this we were talking about beforehand. Was this part of your education training in college going into that?
No, not at all. So, but it's like, but to realize that the staff at Christian High, they know how to pivot. You know, they're hard workers. So it's like I was there to be a supportive role, but they are the ones who drove a lot of these things. Say, hey, we got a problem, let's solve it. You know, and so that's very helpful for me. Even though, I never thought about this happening ever.
Sure.
No, but the staff that we have here really made that an easier transition to do that.
That is amazing. I mean, that ability to pivot, like you're saying, to adapt kind of on the fly, and then adjust and tweak as you go.
Correct.
Right? Because, hey, no, this is a little too long, or we need to do this instead.
Yes.
And that sounds, personally as a teacher, I could see liking that approach where I'm going to have class time here, office hours, in the afternoon for kids who need work. And the kids are going to be working anyway. They've got assignments. So.
Correct.
What about the co-curriculars? Do you want to address how they were impacted by this a little bit?
I'm the JV mock trial coach for Christian High, and that's like for a good example how this goes down. So like the past 2 years, they've been like virtual competitions. So like mock trial used to be in person, go to courtrooms, do a lot of things with other teams, like and large groups. So that was impacted greatly. So that's kind of been a bummer the past 2 years. We've kind of lost out on that socialization, the chance to do those activities. Some of the groups that are like that as well kind of lost out on that. And like the whole sports, like that March through May, we didn't have anything going on. And then coming back after that, just trying to figure out all the protocols, how to handle sports was just a nightmare. When our seasons got flipped,
contact tracing too.
Contact tracing. I mean, I hours contact tracing and all that, and so trying to get sports be the best as we can, get at least some kind of participation was our goal to do that, because I remember we were playing football in April. That was a weird time to do that. But we did what we needed to do to make sure we can have some semblance of normalcy for our kids as we went through this pandemic.
A high school experience.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because when I think about those adaptations that were going on with co-curriculars, and there were some positives, and I think you kind of touched on one, and that we can come back to later. The virtual experience kind of allows you to connect to some programs or competitions that you might not normally.
Yeah.
Right? But finding a way to provide that experience for those kids was so challenging. So if you look at the things that you tried the last couple years, so now kind of moving closer to where this past school year ended, what are the things that you tried, do you think, were in general, like these were effective strategies to use?
So when we came back in that fall of 2020, we developed a unique schedule for us. And so we did like an early dismissal every day, and we had remote Fridays. Because going into that year, we had about 65 kids say, I don't want to come back to school. I want to be home. So we developed a hybrid schedule to do that. And by having that schedule, it gave teachers a little breathing room because every afternoon they still had those office hours for those kids who were remote. To do that, and then everyone was remote on Fridays. So it gave everyone kind of a level playing field of like I'm going to interact with my peers who are at home to do that. So making us be online a little bit doing that during that year forced teachers to be a little bit more of like, what other resources can I provide? How do I record my lectures? How to record some of the materials? How to provide those resources to those kids who are at home? Then they start developing like a library of resources that like, hey, I missed that in class. Hey, I've been absent. Hey, I was sick. I can use those things that have developed by those teachers, and teachers realize, oh, hey, there's more things out there I can use to help keep kids up to speed, which has translated great the past year. Teachers are like, oh, I have more things I can use for my kids.
Right.
So it's like, oh, you've been out for a couple days for feeling sick? Well, tough luck. Oh, actually, no, I have these things that I used before to help keep kids up to speed. So that was one thing that we developed through that unique schedule, got teachers thinking creatively about resources they're going to use.
Right. So expanded a teacher's tool chest in a way, like what can I tap into or provide for students. Students have access to more material or information other ways.
Yeah.
Anything else in that area you want to address?
So it comes down to is like the idea of like being a little more flexible with what materials we're using. That was huge for teachers to realize in terms of like we're not going to have all the kids in the seats in front of you every single day. So you got realizing if you do direct lecture all the time, some kids will be missing out on that material with that one. So those strategies of realizing switching things up, there's different teaching strategies to use even with direct instruction in class goes a long way of kind of connecting with more kids. So because they're acting like a little bit of the reset for our teaching because like for years I kind of taught the same way. This forced that little reset to happen of like I need to rethink how I'm handling things not only online but also in person in the classroom.
Sure. You definitely can fall into a rut or a pattern if you're not careful, especially if you're teaching the same class, year after year. And I'm going to get kind of like for everybody, Zoom became a vocabulary word for everybody that nobody had 3 or 4 years ago, or very few people.
Correct.
Right? And the idea of developing new ways to adapt and
Yep.
new ways to tap into your curriculum to help deliver it to students. Now, related to what we're talking about, I want to take a quick look at, so of all the things that you tried and the adapting and tweaking that you had to do along the way, you know, one of the things about education that I think, you know, for many of us, as a teacher myself at the time, how can I do this in my English classroom? But a school is accommodating way more than that. Your curriculum goes way beyond. You know, you have a variety of classes where maybe Zoom works or only partly works, or, you know, what do you do with a PE class, or, you know, a chemistry class, or a physics class, or, you know, a communications class, or, you know, can you talk about some of the challenges or adaptations you had to do to meet specific curricula challenges in that way?
Yeah. So I was a history teacher, and so I was like thinking of working with our like English and history teachers. Like that was kind of easy, right? There's a lot of ways to have discussions. You can keep doing what you did in class online. But I worked a lot with like our science department because labs. What do you do? You know, labs are in person. You can't do those online. So what teachers like to do is like one, they would like demonstrate like through Zoom.
So record
it, doing it, or actually do it live, right? Everyone's on the Zoom call. All the kids are there. Let's do this together. We were kind of creative too, like some of our biology teachers put little kits together, and then like we would send them home. You know, or have parents come pick them up, say, hey, you're going to do this at home to do that. Like our biomed teacher, they have a lot of resources that they kind of shifted their labs to like online. So like the Project Lead the Way program, they made virtual labs that then kids could do. Now it's not the same, but they could do it online and do it that way. But there's a lot of...
At least go through the process.
Go through the process and then debrief as a class and still kind of do that experience like they would in class, but still try to do it live. You know, because we put a lot of emphasis on live Zoom calls. Like, this is class time, we're going to do this together, trying to mimic what we try to do like in real life. So those caused a little bit of problems, but as we adapted, got better at doing that. Went a long way. So that was good. But like for PE, that was pretty tough, how to handle that. We did a lot of like, hey, here's your workout for the weeks, all right? So like record, how's it going? Did a little bit of recording, video recording, hey, what's your workout looking like? You know, and provide feedback that way. So there's a lot of back and forth of video sharing and discussion-wise, and say, hey, just follow this game plan and doing that. But again, provided a great resource for teachers to think about, well, what can I do differently?
Yeah, it sounds like Chicago Christian, you know, you and your staff were incredibly flexible and adaptive to the different challenges, because especially, you know, during the mitigation and the restrictions and you know, policy changes coming from the state, I mean, a lot of times you didn't know week to week or month to month what was going to be happening. You know, so it sounds very impressive the way you dealt with it. I'd like to ask, we were talking about beforehand, so I think it's worth revisiting. There is a component to the school experience that is very, social is not the correct word, but you know, that socialization that takes place, the connection between staff, administrators, every adult in the building, and students who walk through the doors, and the parents. And you make connections with kids that way. You find out how they're doing, how their day is going, what, you know, where are they at in the world right now. And then you think about seniors who, you know, March 13th, they're just a few months away from graduating, and they're going to finish out their year that way. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things Chicago Christian did to maintain those connections or maintain a semblance of a high school experience for the kids, you know, as they move through?
You know, my mantra, I think it hashtags a lot at school, is that relationships matter. You know, and so that's my big thing that I push at school every single year, and that played a huge role even through the pandemic with that. So like those couple months, like the class of 2020, who kind of lost out on their final 3 months of their senior year, it's like that was our big push of like, okay, how do we support these kids to do this? So for those seniors, for example, my athletic director and my dean of students, myself, we all hopped on a minibus. We took our little night with us, and we visited every single 76 seniors.
Can I refer for people who don't know, you do have a night, a suit of armor.
Yes, we do. We do have we have a suit of armor.
It's about 6 foot tall.
We call him Neville. You know, and so I would haul him in the back of the minibus, and I'd haul him back out, and we visited every single senior's house. And
is there a photo op in there?
Photo op with that, you know, and they get their cap and gown. So we visit every single senior and say, hey, we know this is not what you wanted to have, but we care for you and we love each one of you. And so we want to make sure we show that to them. to do that. So that was fun. But the biggest thing for us, for like when we went into the following year with our kids who stayed home, who chose to stay home, our counselors played a huge role in that. So what they would do would be like, we hosted a weekly check-in session of like, hey, remote kids, here's a Zoom call. Hop on if you need some help with anything, you know. And so like we made a point of like, do we check in with these kids? You know, do we make sure that each one, do they have a connection, even though they weren't in the building? Were they talking to the teachers? Were the counselors available to them, providing them the resources they needed so like they could feel like they could be a part of things? Because we made a point of too, like, hey, if you want to come in for an extracurricular activity, if you want to come for a sport, let's do that. You know, so it's like somehow was make things feel comfortable for them to make sure they had that connection with that. And that was huge to maintain that for us. And again, that goes back to our staff going that extra mile to get that done.
You know, and I want to add on to something in there. You mentioned earlier, 60 plus kids.
Yep.
You know, felt either couldn't or were uncomfortable with coming in. A school the size of Chicago Christian, that's a significant number of the population not in the building.
Yep.
And so that kind of creates that other dynamic where the teacher is dealing with the kids in front of him and then still trying to connect with those kids outside.
Yep. And that's where we developed that hybrid schedule, where we got done around 2, and then we had office hours from like 2 to 3 in the afternoon for those connections with those kids. And I had everyone remote on that Friday, so everyone could feel that connection with like, hey, I'm at home and I'm at home too, and feel that. And so that having that kind of breather room for teachers made life a little easier, because you're right, you got 6 kids on a Zoom call in front of the room, you got 25 kids in front of you in a room. How do you maintain both of those? You know, and that was developing those routines. You know, by having that chance on Friday, provided that chance to like, all right, breathe, reset for the next week, what we want to do to make that work. So that was why we went with that schedule, and it worked beautifully for us to get that done. That's why making those connections was huge for our kids, you know, because we got 315 kids, 60 of those kids right away said, I'm going to stay home.
Kind of related, it wasn't your responsibility, did your feeder schools, your 2 elementary schools or grade schools, did they follow that same structure then?
A little bit, you know, so like the middle schools that we had, they kind of had a little bit of that kind of same kind of strategies that we used. The high school was the one that had the remote Fridays, because we got high school students, a little easier for us to kind of do a little different. Kids drive, that worked better for us for that.
Okay. One last thing, and then I want to look at education going forward, what we learned from this. But the other question, and it just popped in my head while we were talking, and I'm thinking about the parents in this picture, you know, like back to school night or parent-teacher conferences, or if you have kids at home learning, you've got parents at home either supervising or trying to help, you know, their students through that process. What was it? How did the communication process go with the parents? How did you handle parent-teacher conferences?
We handled it in that fall. We gave an option. It was like, we'll have them in person, you know. So we did protocols. We did make sure safety-wise too. We kind of add a little buffer time so like we can clean things down. No, we had things. We had rooms spread out, you know, space doing all those kind of things. And then we all did offer some Zoom calls, right? So say, hey, I don't feel comfortable coming in. Let's schedule time to do a Zoom
hybrid
call. Correct. Doing that. But again, parents like, hey, we're here, we're open. Let's keep doing this.
They liked it. They were good with it.
They were good with that. It's just like, because like that was the joy of us. Like, while other schools were kind of closed a lot, we kept trying to be open as much as we can with the safety in mind to do that. So we always had to keep thinking those protocols, and then over communication with parents all the time. Hey, this is what we're doing. Here's what's coming up. You know, and so parents appreciated that.
As I say, you know, I'm thinking about the experiences that changed, and I think parents felt it too. I'm guessing, but you went from, you know, hybrid and Zoom became part of our vocabulary for everybody, parents, students, teachers, administrators. And then the other element is you had, it sounds like from what you're saying, increased communication, awareness, probably transparency too, with the parents about what's going on and how it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Because like anytime we had like a case come on campus, someone got sick, we were always communicating that out to parents. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to fix things. You know, and so because it came at one point where we had to kind of shut down for 2 or 3 weeks because like I had too many people sick, you know, with that one. But it's like, hey, this is why we're doing this. Here's our goal is to come back, but we had to go through these steps to get that done. You know, and parents just want to know those steps.
So you went full remote for.
Around Thanksgiving, I had like 6 teachers go down, and it's kind of like, and then like 100 kids were out. I was like, all right, we can't keep doing this, you know, and so. Because like that is like we can't make this maintain that. So it was like, all right, we've done remote before. Let's pivot to that. We learned those lessons. They got us through the point. Then we came back ready to go for that.
Wow, yeah, that is incredible. So then, how about if you now look back at the last 2.5 years, and hoping 22-23 is a different looking school year, but maybe you'll be dealing with problems, and you'll probably be better prepared to deal with them. But what things do you think you'll carry with you from the last couple of years that, well, we learned some good things here, and education will look better in the future for, the challenges we faced.
For sure.
What would you say?
Well, a couple things. One, it would be like technology is our friend, and then also we've learned a little bit of boundaries with technology. Like we went full force with like screen time and Zoom calls, and realized great resource, but we also want to now we're back in person again. We want to make sure we have good boundaries with how much technology we use. It's a great tool to have, get a little more resources in the kids' hands, but let's not overuse it all the time. Now we kind of learned that lesson. But the biggest thing for teachers, as we talk about that reset, was to have the idea of it's not about how many chapters you cover in a school year. Right? It's more about the quality of what you're teaching kids versus the quantity of that. How much in depth can you go with the material? It goes a long way with teaching. And when having to cut things out, when you had shorter classes, you're online, remote, teachers really had to focus, what do these kids really need to master before they walk out of my room to do that? That's been great conversations. Think about what that looks like. What are we teaching? Really streamlining things has gone a long way. That's really spurred on a lot of great conversations amongst the teachers. What do we need to do differently with that?
As I say, curriculum is always part of teacher in service or institute. Administrators, doing the research, going to conferences, teachers collaborating, coming together. But how often are you forced to re-examine your curriculum in this way? And then you kind of get to that essentialism element. We have a lot of stuff, we'd love to teach it all, but if we can only get to core stuff, what is that? What does that look like? That kind of focus, I can see, is pretty powerful. And the technology thing, I get. I think at one point there was a fear that that was the future of education, right? Everybody will be on a computer, but we discovered
no,
not
that. So we've realized a lot in terms of being in person goes a long way. And that's why it was a huge emphasis for us. How do we maintain as best we can?
And I want to ask, are there any other lessons that you learned that you can think going forward? But to me, it sounds like from what you've said, the boundaries of the technology and that experience, the focusing in the curriculum, and that's a really powerful chance to re-examine and readdress that. Anything else you want to bring up?
No, I mean, those are big lessons that we had with that one,
Good. Principal Drury, thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Appreciate it.
This is a very interesting conversation. I wish you the best this next year.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope it looks new normal.
Exactly. I hope so.
More traditional experience, but better, it sounds like.
Yeah, it will. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Wurzel, and you've been watching Spotlight. Spotlight has been on education in the 22-23 school year coming up, and we've been talking with Principal Mike Drury from Chicago Christian High School about that topic. Thank you for watching.